a geologist might do to gather information, because you know scientists like to gather information to figure stuff out, right? They have to have the information to design the experiments, is they do this thing called taking core samples. So core usually means like it goes down the middle. Yes, Danielle, that's kind of what core samples are. So they kind of dig down and they take like a tube and they push the tube down and it brings out a sample of the different layers of the rock or the soil, basically of the earth and the materials that are in there. So they don't have to uncover the whole thing and disturb the whole thing. They can just take like a teeny tiny little sample. Okay, so that's what this geologist is doing right here. He's actually measuring. They started to drill down, but he's actually measuring how far down his core sample is going. And these, my friends, are a geologist's core samples. They kind of look like broken up pieces of chalk to me. Is that what they look like to you? Are they all the same color? No. Are you noticing that there's even some different patterns inside each core sample? This one in particular, I'm noticing there's some stripes, which might tell a geologist that there's something different in that layer. Okay. We're noticing that some of them were easier to crumble. Some of them were a little more solid. That's going to tell geologists something, different things. Yes. So they're blue, Sethan, because of the makeup of the minerals or the rocks or the soil that's there. They're different colors. That tells the geologist different things, so they can test for what's in there. Pretty cool though, right? You know, I'm not sure, Cyrus. I think that's a cool question. That would be something if we actually had a geologist, we could certainly look at doing that. Okay, I'm teaching my session right now, okay? Thank you, sir. So what they do is they look for the color, the texture changes, and they use that information to help decide how old something is, what it's made up of, as well as other things. So these I have labeled because I thought it was pretty cool. So this is the core from an oxic zone, about less than 50 foot down. Okay, so this is very different, but this is the same area. But this is a core from an unoxidized mineralized vein at 230 and 240 feet down. So I guess to answer your question, the further down you go, it does change. And the makeup of what's in there is going to change as well. But it's not like I'm saying that all stuff further down closer, the deeper it goes, the darker it gets. That's not necessarily what I'm saying. You'd have to be with a geologist, and I'm sure it's different in different places. So these are core samples. So some of them maybe have rocks in them. Some of them might be just soil or dirt. Some of them might have slightly decomposed. It depends on how far down they're going. Pretty cool though, right? And look at that. Look, this is a geologist's work zone right here. Outside, they're kind of taking all their stuff around with them. Looks pretty cool, right? So geologists will use large drills to help take the core samples. So they're kind of like buzzed down into the ground. And they will examine them for the layers, for which can tell us things about the history of the earth. Like this formed, then this formed, then this formed, which makes sense. Like if you're making layers of stuff, right? You guys ever made like a blanket fort? Right? You got to put stuff on the bottom, and then you can put a layer on top, and then you can put a layer on top. No different than like a cake, right? Like you got to have different layers. When you cut into it, you see the different layers, right? Yeah, very good, Addie. I love how you're putting in that nugget of knowledge. Thank you. So it can also not just tell us what it was made up of, but it can give us clues for what the climate was, what the weather was like, what kinds of things grew or lived at that time. And it can even help us understand, like we saw in the video, a little bit more about when volcanoes erupted or what might have caused that to happen by looking for layers of volcanic ash in those core samples. Seems kind of cool, right? Yeah. All right. So they can also use core samples to learn about other planets. Did you know that geologists will also work with NASA? Come on, nobody else made like a surprise face? Do you know? I know, right? So geologists will work with NASA because do you think everything is made up of the same stuff Earth is made up of? Probably not, right? Like comets and meteors and other planets, moons, they're all made up of different things. But we know that because NASA works with geologists, geologists work with NASA, and they take core samples. There were core samples that were taken from the moon and from the Mars 2020 Perseverance rover. That will also have core samples from Mars so that we can learn about it. Isn't that totally amazing? I know, Cyrus, your face just got very excited. He's like, oh my goodness, you didn't even know that was a thing, did you? Right? You were thinking this is all stuff that happens on our planet. But geologists and the work that they do is also important for understanding other big bodies of rock and dust and things like that, which makes sense that they would work with the space stuff too, right? Yeah, kind of makes sense. So they don't find the comets. That would be a little bit more of, the space stuff. But if they got samples of a comet, that would be where a geologist could come in to kind of help out. Okay, so do we feel like we have kind of like an understanding of what geologists do and how they might use core samples? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Yes? Excellent. Okay, so let's do a little materials check. So we will need, if you have them, there are two different ways you can do this. You can have some candy samples, like little mini candy bars. Okay. You could also, and I think I saw a friend have this, if you also have, you can also do this with several layers of Play-Doh. If you have different colors of Play-Doh, if you kind of roll them together into like a ball or a tube, right? Miriam, you had those, right? You had the Play-Doh? Yes, Miriam's got her. Oh, you have the candy too. Perfect. So you could have multi-layers, multi-colors of Play-Doh kind of all smushed together, or you can have the fun size candy bars. And there are two ways that we can do this. Okay, we can have straws. Now my straws are not super clear because I bought the compostable ones, and Mrs. B didn't realize till this morning that they were a little more white than clear. So I'm going to do it both ways. We're going to use either a straw or I have my butter knife here. We can also just cut into the candy to see the layers. Okay, so we'll do it both ways. So depending if you have the straws or you don't. But the procedure will not change if you have the multicolor Play-Doh or the candy. Okay, now does anyone remember what the rule is with the candy? Do we just sit there and eat candy? No, no, no. STEM is not all just about eating candy, right? STEM is fun because we get to do hands-on stuff and candy is just easy to find. So Mrs. B used a lot of the candy. I know, we can't just sit there and eat the candy. So everybody do me a favor. Put your fingers near your nose. We're going to do our no eating promise. Ready? I will not eat candy until Mrs. B says. That's fine, Asma. If you just have a big one, that's fine. Thank you. All right. Do we all promise? And then again, you have to get the adult with you to approve it as well. That's not like a Mrs. B. No, Maya. You promised. You cannot eat until we're done with the experiment and you have an adult other than Mrs. B saying it's okay. Okay. All right. So the other material you might want to have if you're going to use the straws is a pair of scissors, and I'll show you why. I have big ones, but as long as they can cut through one straw, you should be fine. Okay. All right. Do we feel like we have our materials in front of us? Thumbs up. That's okay. And remember, friends, it is a-okay, okie dokie if you do not have your materials. You can still learn by watching. It's just going to be a little bit of a different experience for you. Okay. And yes, the name of our galaxy is the Milky Way, rather than. Okay, so what we're gonna do, we are going, I'm gonna actually switch my screen here. All right, do you guys see my stuff? Okay, so the first thing I want to do, and I have my little white plate so I know that you guys can see everything nice and clear, is I want to unwrap my candy. I have 4 different kinds of candy here, so I'm going to put my candy out. Okay, and you'll notice I'm not eating any of my candy. Am I? I'm not eating my candy. Cyrus really wants me to eat my candy, though. I can see it in his face. He's like, Mrs. B, you should totally sneak one. But that would break my promise. I can't do that. I promised. Okay. All right, give me a thumbs up when you have, now you don't have to have 4 if you only have 2 kinds of candy, or just 1 kind of candy, that is okay. So just unwrap what you have. And give me a thumbs up when you feel like you are ready to roll. Emily's loving all the candy this week. Ooh, Miriam's ready. Thank you. Addie, Gwen, and Keegan look good. Maya's ready. Okay. So just looking at our candy bars. Okay. I'm noticing this one looks a little different. It's a little longer, it's a little skinnier. But these 3 kind of look pretty much almost the same, don't they? Like I could even get the little lines on the top very close. Would you all agree? Yeah, these look very, very similar, don't they? They do. They look very similar. Now, do you think they're going to be exactly the same when we take a core sample? I mean, I know that they're different kinds of candy because I unwrapped them differently. Okay. So we're going to act like geologists. Well, one of them might be 3 Musketeers. We'll have to find out. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to try this both ways, okay? Because again, you can see that my straw is a little bit white, so I'm not going to be able to see quite as much, but it'll still be cool. I'm going to pick my bottom one to start with. Okay? What you're going to do is you're going to take your straw and kind of just push it down in. You might have to wiggle a little bit, but you want it to kind of almost go through the bottom. Okay? And then you can pull it out. So you have a little hole bopped out of the middle of your candy. And now we have our core sample in the straw. So what you can do, this is where you can have the scissors. You can cut your scissors just, whoop, my scissors flew. You can kind of cut it and make just like a little piece to say, hey, this is the core sample from this candy. Now, if you don't have the straw, okay, if you don't have the straw, I'm going to do this on a totally separate piece of candy so you guys can see what this would look like. You can still do this. If you don't have straws, if your straw is like mine, it's not quite letting you see. What you can do is you can take your butter knife and break the candy in 2, and you'll still be able to see the inside. Okay, and you'll also notice I have not eaten my candy. I'm behaving. Okay, so those of you who took a sample, what do you notice? Is everything the same color inside the sample? No. Do you see different layers inside? Yeah, I'm noticing the top and the bottom are very similar color, and the middle is quite different, isn't it? Yeah, do you think they're all going to be the same like that, or do you think they're all going to be a little bit different? Maybe. We don't know yet. Should we do some more? Should we find more? Thank you, Amina. Amina's going to help us patrol for, okay. So I'm going to take my next one, and I can use that same straw. I can just use the next section. I'm going to take my next core sample. Ooh, this one's a little bit harder to get through. I'm going to wiggle a little bit. And then I'm going to pull my sample out. Ooh, that one's sticky on the outside. Look at that. What I'm going to do, and I'm going to take a tissue actually. I'm gonna wipe the outside a little bit so that I can actually see my sample. That got a little messy. There was some goopy stuff in that one. And I'm gonna cut my core sample. Okay, and again, geologists can't always cut open the earth, but if you're using candy, we certainly can. Okay, so this one, you guys can see, has a dark top layer. There's a little bit of the, oh, there's the squishy. And then we have a lighter layer. And then the bottom layer, again, we have the chocolate. You guys see all of that? It does look like caramel or caramel. But you can see the layers inside the core sample as well. Looks like that caramel got a little squishy. Do you think there's ever something in nature that would be squishy or might interrupt what the core sample is trying to pull out? Maybe. Yeah. Or the opposite, where they're trying to get a core sample and maybe it's so hard that they have a hard time getting a core sample. Could be the opposite as well. Yeah, like fossils. You could have pockets of different gases that might interfere or might cause slipping when they're trying to do that. No different than my caramel. Okay. All right, I have 2 left. I got to keep going. So again, we can take our core sample. And I'm trying to stay organized. I'm keeping my core sample next to the candy I took it from. All right. This is my last one. I'm not sure that this one's going to work so well. All right. I'm going to try and take a sample of this one. Oh my goodness. That one busted my drill. Look at that. Look at that. Busted my drill. There's some hard stuff down there. I'm going to just take a sample of what I have. I'm going to try and cut it instead. I got to change my drill. Oh, okay. That one was hard. My core sample did not work so well that time. But that's why there's a super hard layer down there. Candy versus teacher, you got it. It is a Twix bar. But it's a harder layer. So my softer drill did not want to go through that hard layer. So I had to change my equipment. I had to change my tool. No different than a geologist will do. Okay. So we've got our candy core samples, right? Oh my goodness, and my candy core samples are flying all over. Okay. So I'm going to take my 4 core samples and I'm going to line them up next to each other. You guys see those? I know my plate got a little messy. Can you see my samples? Okay. Tell me some observations. What are some things we're noticing in the core samples? Even though they're all chocolate candies, are they all exactly the same? Are the insides of the candies the same? No. What are some differences that we notice? I mean, we can even line up the actual candies here too. We did that one already. Yeah, the coloring is different. The layers are different. Some have caramel, so they have a similar color, and we know it's caramel, so the coloring is very similar on 2 of them, right? Yeah. The third one is kind of reddish. At the bottom it is. So even though we could say these are all chocolate candy bars, just like we could say these are all rocks, does that mean that the inside, what's in there, is going to be the same, that the layers are going to be the same? No, right? All of these are slightly different.